Aloha. My name is Roby, and I'm coming to you from Pleasanton, California, which is about an hour southeast of San Francisco. I am so excited to share this lesson with you and this time with you. Many of you know how much Brock, my husband, and I love you all on the islands. We miss you dearly. We look forward to be able to spend time with you face to face soon and wish I could be physically there now with all of you. But before I go on, I want to share a little bit about myself. My husband and I were in the ministry for a little over 20 years, and we had the incredible blessing of planting the congregation on Oahu and assisting with the church plantings on Maui, the Big Island, and on Guam as well. Those were amazing years in our life. We saw so many miracles. So many of you are miracles to us, and it was an incredible time. We treasure those times. They are like our stones of remembrance for our faith. Both our boys were born on Oahu and Honolulu, and they love being able to claim that. And I feel like so many of you are still their aunties and uncles, and they will always feel that way. Our youngest is married. He's 28, and I finally have the daughter I've always wanted. And our oldest is 29 now, hard to believe. And he's living on his own in a group home not far from us. Comes home on weekends still, so we still get to see him, and he is doing well. So for the most part, Brock and I are empty nesters, and we are loving it. It's a great time for us and a great time in our lives. You know, I just want to say I really love the theme of your series of lessons, Hidden Figures. I love that you are lifting up women who were marginalized, who were looked down upon, and yet who God lifted up in His Word and who were never hidden from God. And that just means a lot to me. There were amazing lessons before this. Kay McKean and Son Galang both did incredible jobs. And if you haven't heard their lessons, I encourage you to go back and listen to them. And I am looking forward today to talk about another woman who is in the lineage of Jesus, Rahab. And I've titled my lesson, Imperfect People for God's Perfect Plan. So, through all my many years of teaching the Bible and being in the ministry, I honestly, to my shame, don't think I have ever done a lesson just on Rahab. I know I've done lessons where I've talked about the Battle of Jericho, them crossing the Jordan River, the two spies going to Jericho, but to do a lesson just on Rahab, I know other women have done it. I just have not done a good job for that. She's been a hidden figure to me. It was so much easier for me to focus on the spies or on Joshua, on the walls of Jericho falling down and the amazing things God did with that, which it is an amazing thing. But, Rahab's story is such a messy story, and it's uncomfortable because of her lifestyle and where she came from. And I don't like messy stories. I like the Bible to be clean and neat. I mean, ask my husband. My favorite channels lately have been the Hallmark channel, so I can watch a nice Hallmark movie. I am kind of getting bored with them these days because they have the exact same formula, but my husband humors me and will watch one with me every now and then. Or nice PBS series. I'm loving All Creatures Great and Small right now, and if you love animals, you love being a vet, you'll love that one too. But they're not full of sex. The good guys always win. It's always a happy ending. There's no weird psychological stuff. Good always overcomes evil. It's nice, clean. It's fun to me, and I can escape some reality, I guess. But the Bible is not always nice, clean, not messy. No, the Bible is very real, because the world is not clean and nice and messy. So the Bible doesn't just paint rosy pictures, and I think that's a really good thing for us. But I had to learn to get comfortable with that. So let's look at the story of Rahab before we go any further. And of course, as I said in the past, I would have said, let's read about the Battle of Jericho, or let's look about what the spies are doing today. But no, we are going to look at the story of Rahab. And the Israelites had just defeated the Amorite kings, the king of Sihon and the king of Og. Then they sent some spies across the Jordan River into Canaan. And it says in Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 to 7, it says, "And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.' And they went and came into a house of a prostitute named Rahab, who lodged there. And it was told to the kings of Jericho, 'Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land.' Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, 'Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land.' But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, 'True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them.' But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on her roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out." So we see here in Joshua chapter 2, Rahab is a prostitute. And that's uncomfortable for the Bible to be talking about prostitution. And it's so uncomfortable that religious leaders in the past centuries even, have tried to say Rahab was just an innkeeper and not a prostitute. But no, the Bible makes it pretty clear. She's talked about even in the New Testament as a harlot. She's known as Rahab the harlot. How would you like that after your name? And I think, what is it with the spies? No one ever talks about how the spies went to a prostitute's home to lodge. I mean, what's up with that? I think the Me Too movement these days would have a little bit to say about that double standard, but we're not going to go down that path. But anyway, some do try to say, they kind of give the spies an out here and say, it'd be a way to be a little more incognito, going to a brothel. The home was on the wall of Jericho, so they could escape really easily. And yeah, I can maybe buy that. I can't buy the incognito because the king of Jericho heard that they came and wanted to pursue them. So that didn't really work. But anyway, it's a messy story. And then Rahab lies. I was always taught from the time I was just a little teeny little girl that lying was wrong, that God didn't like it. I just thought, if I'm caught in a lie and die on that day, I'm going to go to hell, and lying's bad. And here we have a woman lying. She's a prostitute. She's a deceiver. Oh my goodness. How can she be lifted up in the Bible? It's messy. It's very messy. So does this mean lying's okay? So does this mean living that lifestyle's okay? How can this woman do anything good? How can the spies even be good? No one ever really thinks that, but I kind of thinking, well, how come the spies are good? It's just against my rule-following self, this story, everything about this story. But the thing I've really come to love about the Bible, and this is, I guess if I have points, I would say it's my first point, is we are all imperfect people. We are messy people. And I know that's kind of obvious, and don't blow that point off too quickly. Or don't just say, and speak for yourself. But we're all messy people. And I think this was something that was super hard for me to get comfortable with about myself. I am a rule follower. I like knowing the rules. I like knowing I'm following the rules. And I like knowing you're going to be happy with me because I followed all the rules. And ultimately, God will be happy with me because I followed all the rules. I want to feel justified. I want to feel like I deserve the good things in my life and I deserve to go to heaven. I don't want to feel undeserving and feel indebted to someone because they forgive me, or in my pride, I just want to have my right rationalizations and feel like I've earned God's favor. It makes me look good, and I like looking good. I don't like looking messy. So it was a really hard thing for me when I started studying the Bible to admit I'm messy. And even as a Christian, for the last 30 some years, I think it's coming up on 38 years for me, that I have had times where it's really hard to admit my heart is messy. So it kind of takes God out of the picture when we do things and feel like we deserve good things, right? It doesn't lift God up, it lifts ourselves up. And to be honest, it's a horrible way to live because you have a standard you now have to live up to. And then you have to pretend you're still living up to that standard, even though inside there's things you feel really guilty about. And whether you've been a Christian like me for over 38 years or just been a Christian a short time, or you're not even a Christian today, we all can relate to what it's like to feel that guilt inside and yet pretend we don't feel it. It's just so much easier to admit, I'm a mess, I need help. God, will you help me? Thank you, God, for still loving me. And that God not only loves me, He actually likes me and He really wants me. That's what started to soften my heart. And I know not everyone's like me. I know there are some people that feel like they've messed up too much, and maybe they keep messing up. And there's no way that God still wants them. But when we realize God used amazingly messy people, messy, sinful people in the Bible, we can believe God can use us too. And not just use us, but really want us with Him. Doesn't that soften your heart to realize that as awful as Rahab's life was, and I don't necessarily believe she chose that life. She might have been forced into that life. It might have been her only option. And yet we can still feel like we have no option, and yet God still wants us. Isn't that amazing? I think, why is it really important to understand that we're all imperfect, that we're all a mess? I think there's a couple of reasons that I consider super important. And I think the first one is it makes us super grateful to God. Again, because God not only wants us, He likes us in spite of all our mess. And He doesn't see us as messy. He sees us as His glorious children. It's like those of you who are mothers, you know, when your little boy falls asleep, you're not thinking about all the craziness he did that day. You see the beauty of your child. And I believe that's how God sees us. What a joy it was for me to come to grips with my selfishness, my pride, my arrogance, all the gross stuff that was inside that I could hide pretty well. I felt so messy and so unlovable. And yet through the Bible, I saw how much God loved me. And to this day, it's what softens my heart every day when I read the Bible and when I pray and I see, wow, even having a crazy day yesterday, God still loves me today. I think the other thing that's awesome about it is it shows how great God is. It shows His perfect power, like in 2 Corinthians 12, 9-11, when Paul talked about how he had these thorns in his flesh, but he realized he was going to start boasting in his weaknesses, because when he's weak, God is strong. It shows that God's power is strong. And I think it finally dawned on me, if I really love God, I want my life to make God look good, not make me look good. If you love someone, you want them to be honored. You want people to look at them and think they're awesome, not you're awesome. And I think that's what it does for God when we admit how messy we are, and that God has changed our life and keeps changing our life daily. You know, when we planted the church on Oahu, I'll never forget. So we came with 19 other people. It was 21 of us. And I don't know how we got dubbed this. I guess I kind of know why, but I don't know who dubbed us this, but we were kind of dubbed the Lean, Green, and Not Very Mean mission team. And so we had been appointed evangelist women's ministry leader, which is kind of the main leadership of the church. We were just considered intern ministry people, and they sent us here and said, let's see what God does with you. And over the incredible time that we had there, I remember going back to a meeting on the mainland and people making a comment about that, about saying, wow, it is amazing what God has done on Oahu. They didn't say, wow, it's amazing what Brock and Ann have done. It was, wow, look at what God has done. And I tell you, I remember flying home from that meeting so full of joy, feeling like, wow, God, this is what it feels like to make you look good. And I'm so grateful to just be a little part of that. That there's nothing awesome about us, there's everything awesome about you. And I think when we admit our messiness, there's nothing better than lifting God up and feeling the joy in that. And so, the other thing about Rahab, and if, I'd call this my second point, is that God always has a perfect plan. The question is, will you trust his plan? God always has a perfect plan. We sometimes want to know that plan right away, or we don't trust that plan. We want the plan to be what we want it to be. So let's again look at Rahab's life. In Joshua chapter 2, starting in verse 8, we know she hid the spies. We know she lied about it. And then in verse 8 it says, before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know the Lord has given you the land, and that fear of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. Think about that. That's 40 years ago. But it was on her heart that God had dried up the Red Sea all those years ago. And we heard what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. And there was no spirit left in any man because of you, for the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Look at what God did. He had the spies go to not just any home, not just any prostitute's home, but to the home of a prostitute who knew what the God of Israel had done 40 years before, who had heard what the God of Israel had done to the kings of Sihon and Og. And she knew that God, their God, was the God of heaven and earth. She was a woman who had faith, and God used her, sent the spies to the right person to protect them and to protect all of Israel through her. Isn't that an amazing plan? I would be surprised if anyone else really believed in Jericho. In my opinion, they probably thought their walled city was so secure. And if you study about Jericho, you'll find out that Jericho is one of the oldest civilized, at that time, city. And its walls were so protective. And so I think they had a false security. But Rahab believed that God was God, and God worked in her heart. God chose just the right house. Then in verse 12 it says, now then, please swear to me, this is Rahab speaking, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you will also deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. Then she gives them direction to go hide, begs for her life again and for that of her family. They confirm they'll save her and her family. And you know the rest of the story. The Israelites marched around Jericho. The seventh day, they blow the trumpet, the wall falls down, they go in, and they save Rahab and her family. And in chapter 6, verse 26, it says in this one verse, verse 25, but Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. If the king of Jericho had found out she had hidden the spies, do you think her life would have been spared by him? Absolutely not. She put her life in danger. But instead, God's plan was that she would be remembered in Matthew 1:5. Gosh, this makes me emotional to think about that. That Rahab, a prostitute, a Canaanite woman from an incredibly pagan city that was incredibly promiscuous, had infant sacrifices, a horrible city, that this woman would now be remembered in Matthew 1:5 in the lineage of Jesus and be an ancestor to the physical Son of God on earth. It's amazing. She became a part of the family of God. She married a man named Salmon, who was not just any Israelite. He was actually a leader in the tribe of Judah. He was probably a pretty amazing man. We don't know a whole lot about him, but we know that. She became the mother of Boaz, who, if you read the book of Ruth, you'll know who he is, and became the great-grandmother of King David. What an incredible plan for a little prostitute who maybe had no hope in life to ever do anything different. She lived on the wall of Jericho, which meant she was part of a middle class, or probably lower middle class. The poor lived outside the city, but she was probably lower middle class, which I guess we would think if it's prostitute. But I don't know. I don't know how people at that time really looked at prostitutes, but it couldn't have been a happy life for her. But God put her in the lineage of our Lord. Isn't that an amazing thing? What a glorious plan he had for her life. Do you think she would have ever believed her life would have ended up that way? I don't think so. I wonder, if she felt like being a prostitute was the only way she could control her own destiny. You know how a lot of times we want to just control our destiny and we kind of mess up our life? Maybe that's what she felt. But somehow she decided to give God the chance. She decided to give God the control. She decided to put her life on the line and save the spies in hopes that God might remember her. Oh my goodness, what a plan. Her faith so impressed God that look what God says about her. I love this. In James chapter 2, verse 21 to 25. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And you're saying, Anne, you're reading about Abraham. Why? Well, look, verse 25. It says, and in the same way of Father Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son Isaac, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. You know, James was probably written to a mostly Jewish Christian audience, so imagine how they felt about their patriarch, Abraham. He was so incredibly honored. And who does James put on equal footing with Abraham but Rahab? I mean, he could have chosen, consider in the same way Noah built an ark after not knowing what rain even was. Or, I mean, there's so many other options he could have chosen. He chose Rahab. Isn't that amazing? I feel amazed for her. That's how I feel. Wow. Like Abraham and Rahab, though, their faith got tested, so does ours. Abraham and Rahab trusted a God who's the Lord of heaven and earth with their lives. How about you? Do you trust in God's perfect plan? How about singles with dating? It's so easy for us to want to take control, to want to listen to the world, to be willing to be impure or immoral, to find a guy because we just don't want to be alone. Will you trust God's plan and do it God's way? How about marrieds? Do you trust God's plan to stay faithful? Not just physically, but in your mind and your heart, and really strive to fight to have a good marriage, to give up any bitterness, anger, resentment that can so easily creep in, and trust that God will help you get the help you need? How about just with bitterness and forgiveness? Sometimes, honestly, I think that's been probably the hardest thing for me over the last number of years. I think because when we lived in Hawaii, I don't feel like I ever got very hurt, especially not from disciples. But now I've been hurt by disciples, people who I looked up to, who should have cared about me or protected me and didn't. It's hard to give up. I mean, sometimes when I say give up, I mean give up the bitterness. I want my emotions, my feelings to be validated. I want to see that other person come and say, "Oh, Anne, you were so right. I was so wrong. I am so sorry." And I want that vindication. Sometimes it's just hard to trust God will work everything out for His purpose and plan. And that is all I should want. And maybe me going through these hard times is making me into a better Christian woman. That's what we should want. Or just with life, when we feel like the hurt has come at the hands of God, when we feel life's unfair and we just get bitter. I mean, I can feel that way having a child with special needs sometimes. Will we trust God's perfect plan? I can only imagine the unfairness that Rahab might have felt about life. And then in closing, in Hebrews 11:31, in the great hall of faith that we all, if you haven't read it, go and read it. You'll see all these amazing men God talks about. The two women He mentions, Sarah and verse 31, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Do you realize in Hebrew 11, there's so many men mentioned, but one of two women is Rahab. I would have thought, I even talked to Brock about this the other day. I'm like, did you realize Deborah's not even there? They mentioned Barak. Barak, who wouldn't have gone to fight against their enemies unless Deborah went with him. They don't mention Deborah, they mention Barak. But Rahab is mentioned. I would have thought, wouldn't she say by faith Ruth, she was willing to stay with her mother-in-law and go to this foreign land. No, it doesn't mention any of these other people. It mentions Rahab, a woman of an amazing faith. God, it amazes me to see how much God honors a prostitute's faith through His perfect plan for her life and puts her in the lineage of Jesus to inspire us centuries and centuries even now with her faith. After spending these last few months studying and praying and thinking about this lesson, I am humbled by the thought that for so long Rahab was a hidden figure to me. And if I ever meet Rahab face to face in heaven, I'm going to apologize to her for my lack of respect. I am so grateful that she was never hidden from God, and that God, in His perfect plan, gave her a place of special honor. May we always believe God has a perfect plan for our lives as well, and that we will trust that plan no matter what happens, no matter how messy things get. And then God will get the glory as people see how truly great our God is. Thank you, and I love you.
Hey ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if you have not, go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Once again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!